Good morning and welcome to the FCC's Forum on Open Radio Access Networks. This event originally was scheduled for March, but I hope and expect it will be worth the wait. Thank you all for joining us, especially our conference participants. We have quite a lineup. Among those speaking, all 5 FCC commissioners, experts representing world-leading technology companies and upstart firms, top talent from the Academy, Commerce Department Director of Policy and Strategic Planning, Robert Blair, former ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Jane Harman, who now leads the Wilson Center, and for the first time I'm aware of, the U.S. Secretary of State is participating in an official FCC event. Now, usually the FCC could only get a turnout like this by offering free food. Clearly, that's not happening here. So what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is 5G. These next generation wireless networks will be embedded in almost every aspect of our society and economy, from businesses to homes, hospitals to transportation networks, manufacturing to the power grid. Over the past few years, the FCC has aggressively executed our 5G FAST plan. This strategy features 3 key parts: freeing up spectrum for the commercial marketplace, promoting wireless infrastructure, and encouraging fiber deployment. Now, this strategy has yielded big results. For example, we've already completed multiple spectrum auctions that have repurposed huge swaths of spectrum for 5G. And we've seen record-breaking capital investments in infrastructure essential for next-generation networks. But our focus isn't limited to promoting networks that are strong. We're also committed to making sure that they are secure. For years, U.S. government officials have expressed concern about the national security threats posed by certain foreign communications equipment providers. To address this concern, we've aimed to protect the integrity of the communications supply chain, that is, the process by which products and services are manufactured, distributed, sold, and ultimately integrated into our communications networks. And specifically, the FCC has prohibited the use of money from our Universal Service Fund to purchase or obtain any equipment or services produced or provided by companies that the FCC determines pose a national security threat, namely Huawei and ZTE. We've also started a process to identify and catalog insecure equipment used in USF-funded communications networks so that we can hopefully implement a program to remove and replace it once Congress appropriates funds for this purpose. Now, looking to the next generation of wireless technology, much of the equipment at the heart of 5G networks currently comes from just a few global suppliers. 3 of the most prominent are Sweden's Ericsson, Finland's Nokia, and South Korea's Samsung, but the largest of them is the Chinese company Huawei. Carriers building out 5G networks rightfully worry that Huawei equipment could expose them to security risks. Huawei's market power, aided by generous subsidies from the Chinese Communist Party, often might seem to make that company the cheapest and thus best option for network equipment. But the Chinese national intelligence law requires companies like Huawei to cooperate with and keep secret state intelligence work. The law also creates opportunities for Chinese intelligence agencies to compel access to an organization's facilities, including communications equipment in certain cases. In short, many are recognizing that you get what you pay for, and that the long-term costs of using insecure equipment are likely to outweigh any short-term savings. In addition to these security issues, carriers may be concerned by a relatively consolidated marketplace. Some have told me, both here and abroad, that vendor diversity is useful in terms of price competition, avoiding the lock-in problem, and ensuring a backup supplier, among other things. Well, technological innovation has opened up a new path to address these concerns, and that technology is the subject of today's forum, Open Radio Access Networks, or OpenRANs. OpenRANs could transform 5G network architecture, costs, and security. Traditionally, wireless networks rely on a closed architecture in which a single vendor supplies many or all the components between the network base stations and the core. But OpenRANs can fundamentally disrupt this marketplace. We could see an exponential growth in the number and diversity of suppliers. We could see more cost-effective solutions. And critically, we could see the keys to security in the hands of network operators, as opposed to a Chinese vendor. All this might explain why some telecom companies are beginning to develop and deploy open, interoperable, standard-based, and virtualized radio access networks. Now, as an added bonus, many of the leading firms in the Open RAN space are based here in the United States or in countries generally aligned with our vision of 5G security. How this marketplace will evolve is hard to predict with certainty, but here's what I can say with confidence. Innovation and competition make for a stronger, healthier telecom ecosystem. That's why so many are excited about Open RAN's potential. And that's why this forum is so timely. We want to encourage research and development into innovative network solutions. One way to do that is by convening the top experts in the field to discuss the benefits of Open RAN, the challenges of implementing it, and the lessons learned from deployments thus far. That's exactly our task today. And so I'm grateful for our impressive roster of public and private sector experts for taking the time to discuss with us the current state of Open RAN related technologies and the path ahead. Now, before I relinquish the floor, I want to thank the FCC staff who helped make this event possible. Among the 31 staffers who brought us from concept to concrete, Ken Baker, Connie Diaz, Kamran Etimad, Manisha Ghosh, Charles Matthias, Robert Pavlik, Les Platt, Michael Smith, Cecilia Sulhoff, Becky Tangren, Janet Young, and Marasha Younger from our bureaus, Evan Swarstraber in particular, and Sean Spivey from my office, and as always, Jeff Reardon and the Commission's AV team. With that, it is my honor to present this important message from the United States Secretary of State, a distinguished Kansan, and my friend, Mike Pompeo.
Hello, everyone. Secretary Pompeo here. I first want to thank Chairman Pai, a fellow Kansan, for inviting me to speak. As Secretary of State, I've spent a lot of time addressing the China challenge. The Chinese Communist Party is leveraging its technological prowess to erode freedom and democracy here at home, indeed all around the world. That's why the United States has called on our allies and partners in government and industry to help us protect our people's freedoms and data from the CCP. I'm very pleased to say that a growing wave of countries and companies have banned Huawei and chosen clean vendors for their 5G networks. Now it's about 30 countries that are clean countries, and many of them are the world's biggest telecommunications companies and nations. They're using technology that makes them clean telcos. We've also rolled out the Clean Network, a coalition of like-minded countries and companies committed to protecting user privacy and cybersecurity from malign actors. The Clean Network maximizes connectivity without risk from untrusted vendors and stops the CCP censorship of Americans. I hope today that each of you will determine how you or your company can join or support the Clean Network as well. On a similar note, I support the FCC and Chairman Pai's strong efforts to free as much possible spectrum for 5G as possible, and to do so as quickly as possible. I hope that each of you will do that too, because when Americans can compete and innovate, we will win. Freeing spectrum will drive a fast build out of our own 5G networks, and freeing spectrum will stimulate innovation that will drive economic growth and push 5G technology into everything from manufacturing floors to telemedicine to autonomous vehicles. And it's critical. It's critical for our national security and that of other countries. We want our friends to choose trusted 5G vendors for their network needs, not vendors tied to the Chinese Communist Party. Look, the world doesn't want China's communists hacking into self-driving cars or their home appliances or their medical tools. If innovators can integrate open networks and deliver the best network edge solutions, we'll help citizens all around the world avoid these very threats. But we need to be open, the spectrum needs to be open, and we need to do each of these things if we're going to achieve any of these goals. Look, it's very simple. Technology must advance freedom. That's what we believe in the Trump administration, and we hope you'll join us in these efforts. Thank you again for having me. Good luck.
My thanks to the Secretary for those remarks. And now we are honored to hear from Mr. Rob Blair, who works at the Commerce Department as the Director of Policy and Strategic Planning. I've seen him hard at work on these issues both here and abroad, and I'm glad he's able to participate in today's forum. Mr. Blair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeet. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Very good. First, I wanted to say thank you for the invitation to speak today. You and your staff have been a pleasure to work with, and I know all the work that went into making this event happen. This is a critical time for us to get together and talk about this issue, and I'm very much looking forward to discussing ORAN a bit. And as you well know, I think it's going to be a key part in building a more secure, democratic, and diverse telecommunication system. Your comments were perfect opening up this session. They're a great introduction to the situation we find ourselves in, and truly the promise of ORAN and a more diverse telecommunication ecosystem. But before I turn to ORAN, I want to note at a very high level some of the work that the Department of Commerce is doing to support the national strategy to secure 5G. The administration, all of us, continue to strongly defend our nation's economic and national security. One big focus of that effort is securing our telecommunication system. Back in March, the president signed the national strategy to secure 5G, which I think is an incredible achievement. And the Department of Commerce has been leading or supporting a number of work streams within this national strategy. I'm not going to have time this morning to go through all of our work on this front, but I want to highlight just a few key points. First, NIST, our National Institute of Standards and Technology, is increasing its focus and investment on advanced communications. It's identifying security gaps in the communications equipment supply chain, and it's coordinating participation in many of our standards development activities. Our International Trade Administration is developing a strategic framework for promoting U.S. 5G tech companies around the globe, working closely with our colleagues at the State Department and working with our trading partners to achieve the goals of our national strategy. And NTIA, our National Telecommunications and Information Administration, is working to make more spectrum available for 5G networks. It's also launched a program to share information about supply chain risks with industry partners, and this will be a key point on establishing clean paths overseas and clean networks overseas, as Secretary Pompeo just alluded to. NTIA is also working with international and private sector partners to develop principles for promoting a vibrant and diverse 5G ecosystem, which I'll return to in a moment. Now, I want to turn to the challenge we face, our vision for a more secure and prosperous future, and our plan to achieve that vision, working in coordination and always cooperation with our private sector partners. The current situation presents our nation and frankly most of the world with a serious challenge. There's only a few companies at this point building 5G networking equipment. Some of those companies are subject, as we've discussed, to the control of authoritarian governments that, among other things, are not governed by the rule of law, do not have independent judiciaries, and have no respect for personal privacy protections. In fact, some of these governments use our very freedoms against us. This situation is bad for countries, it's bad for companies, and it's bad for citizens. It's bad for countries because they cannot build strong societies when they have untrustworthy and insecure telecommunications infrastructure. It's bad for companies because the natural monopolies held by incumbents have such high barriers to entry that new, more innovative companies are not able to break into the marketplace and provide better, less expensive products and services. And finally, the situation is bad for American citizens and indeed citizens around the world who cannot enjoy the fruits of new, innovative products and services that never reach the market, and risk having limited or needlessly expensive access to 5G networks that even then would continue to be insecure and untrustworthy. So given these challenges, we have a vision with the United States government of harnessing the potential of 5G to increase prosperity while simultaneously increasing our economic and national security. This vision includes a couple points. One, improving our and our allies' economic and national security by building our future telecom systems without any untrusted vendors. And secondly, harnessing the power of a well-functioning market to support innovation that improves the function of these 5G systems, but also delivers new and better products and services that improve the lives of people around the world. The outcome will be more secure networks, and it'll be markets that reward innovation and provide higher quality, lower cost products and services to companies and to consumers. So the real question at this point is, how are we going to achieve this vision? As part of the national strategy to secure 5G I mentioned a moment ago, the administration, the Department of Commerce, and specifically NTIA, are focused on promoting vendor diversity. By increasing vendor diversity, we can reduce or eliminate reliance on untrusted vendors, and we can increase competition in this important marketplace. Based on stakeholder feedback we've received over the last several months, we know industry is eager to build and deploy open and interoperable 5G networks. We at the department understand that the move toward open architectures can and should be industry-led, but the government has to help. One way we're helping is working with like-minded governments to identify ways to collaborate on RDT&E. A second way that we're working on is to build off the success of the Prague proposals by exploring the development of principles for open and interoperable networks. These principles could identify further ways to foster vendor diversity and infrastructure resiliency, as well as to ensure open and competitive markets. They could drive rapid innovation, collaborative design, and interoperability, and they could facilitate the transition from our current situation and the challenges it presents to open networks and their benefits to consumers, countries, and companies. So with, with that, if I could ask everybody to mute their lines, I'm getting some feedback. And I'd like to thank everybody for all of your work and your attention on this critically important issue. This is one of the great challenges and opportunities for virtual conferencing, and I think we're working through some of the kinks sometimes. But we have a chance right now to build a telecommunication system that will help protect the very principles of freedom and openness that this country was founded upon. And I'm looking forward to continuing our partnership with the FCC, with the rest of the administration, because we really are at a seminal point in the development of these processes. Ajit is a great leader in this, and it's always a pleasure to work with him. Back to you, Ajit.
Hey, thanks so much, Rob, for rolling with the punches and for those very insightful remarks. It's been an honor to work alongside you here and abroad, as I mentioned. Now it is my pleasure to introduce a good friend to those in the technological innovation space, the Honorable Jane Harman. As I mentioned, the former ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, the leader of the Wilson Center, and most stirringly to me, just a dedicated public servant who's dived into these issues for a long time and has worked on a bipartisan basis to advance the public interest. Madam Congresswoman, the floor is yours.
Ajit, thank you very much. I appreciate that introduction, and I also appreciate I guess it's 20 minutes of remote learning that I've just done on this very complicated and fascinating topic. I'm Jane Harman, recovering politician, think tank CEO, and digital adapter. Let me salute you, Ajit, for your leadership at the FCC, for your friendship, and for your bravery in inviting this grandmother of 8 to address a hot tech topic. I hope my grandchildren think I'm really cool by doing this. Anyway, even as a digital adapter, I'm not a total novice on 5G, the OpenRAN concept, or even on the work of the FCC. I can even remember when 3G and 4G were just joining the alphabet. My congressional district, as some of you may know, was the satellite producing center of the universe in Los Angeles, just south of Santa Monica. So understanding communication satellites was a necessity. And oh, by the way, serving on the Intelligence Committee was too. And I was very proud to serve there for 8 years of my 400 years in the United States Congress. As a member of the House Intelligence and Commerce Committee, where Mike Pompeo and I overlapped for 1 month before I left to run the bipartisan oasis of the Wilson Center, my colleagues and I worked to improve radio interoperability after 9/11 for first responders. And by the way, at the Wilson Center, our Science, Technology, and Innovation program has just developed a microsite with deep dive interactives and briefs on key 5G policy challenges, both security and economic. Check it out at 5g.wilsoncenter.org. I'm not kidding. There'll be a test at the end of my remarks, so you better take a look. So here are some observations from my experience in Congress and from conversations with the many geniuses at the Wilson Center. First, and you've heard this from the other speakers, the U.S. Should be properly proud of our history of innovation, especially in technology. We sequenced the human genome, and today most anyone can access that technology for a few $100s. We haven't always been and haven't needed to be, let me underscore that, haven't needed to be first movers. Europe beat us at inventing the jet engine, but America was able to eventually lead the industry through efficient production and distribution, which is why the word race in the context of 5G isn't very helpful. The question is not who is winning, but how we can put ourselves in the best possible position to take advantage of current and future economic benefits while addressing security concerns. I totally agree with Secretary Pompeo, associated with this 5th generation of cellular networks. We have major advantages: the world's best academic training, significant sources of funding and industry, well-versed in research, development, production, and distribution. Second, it's boring to talk about setting standards. But they matter. Firms need an industry standard so they are not at competitive disadvantage. Plus, if we aren't setting the standards, someone else is. We were traditionally the leaders in sitting in the front row of all the standard setting meetings, and now we aren't. That's a big disadvantage, which will only get bigger if we don't change course. Third, policymakers need to think outside the box. That's why the FCC is hosting today's session on OpenRAN. I first saw a data center, or VPod, built in the cloud. I actually did this on a study trip with congressional staff to the West Coast 3 years ago. I have some serious privacy issues, I do, with AI voice assistants, but was astounded to see one take a command and watch the code built in front of me. Even my grandchildren can't do that. I admit I didn't really know what I was watching at the time, but later it became an aha moment. The OpenRAN concept isn't that different. Rather than needing hardware, we can take advantage of software, as many said before me, to do many of the things we used to need screws and motherboards to do. In some cases, software is better. And we in the West do software very, very well. In addition, the OpenRAN moves 5G away from proprietary systems dominated by a handful of companies to a diversity of hardware and software players. Put simply, it allows carriers to shop around and then plug and play. While some worry that more software means more problems, others suggest that open networks will mean more eyeballs where it counts. I've always found that more eyes and more brain cells are better. It also means that we even the competitive playing field and give more startups a chance to create the next disruptive innovation we never expected. Fourth and finally, the elephant in the room, and Mike Pompeo mentioned it, China. Our discussions over OpenRAN should not only be dominated by concerns over Chinese companies such as Huawei and ZTE. Its benefits are far broader. OpenRAN isn't a geopolitical silver bullet. It's only one part of a broader set of steps necessary to shape a robust and secure telecommunications ecosystem. And there's more to do. But in our discussion of OpenRAN and in future conversations, we can and we should dig deep into the logistical and technological weeds. We have to answer questions about integration and roles and responsibilities across a diverse network of players. We will also need to figure out, and I think this is a big part of today, how to help US companies enter the market that OpenRAN makes possible. In short, OpenRAN is not the end of the 5G conversation, but it's a great beginning. It's a huge opportunity for the US and the West. Let's seize it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Jane, for taking the time. And I suspect you're going to be teaching your grandkids a fair bit more than you're letting on. I really appreciate your willingness to participate today and look forward to executing on your vision of a more prosperous, more secure future. Now it is my pleasure to turn to a friend to all of the commission, Commissioner Jeffrey Starks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for organizing this important discussion. As many of those gathered here today may recall, the United States was once a worldwide leader in the telecom network hardware. Companies like Lucent and Motorola led the world in the design and manufacture of telecom equipment, and from radio antennas to the core. Unfortunately, that American leadership in this market has disappeared over time. And while many factors were at work, American telecom carriers were eventually left without a reasonable domestic option. And the timing could not have been worse, as the Chinese government's Made in China 2025 strategy decisively tilted the playing field in favor of its own telecom equipment manufacturers. And so Chinese governments supported artificially and lowered Huawei and ZTE's prices, assisted in their research and product development, and undercut international competition. This was not free market competition, but part of a strategy to leverage economic power into geopolitical dominance. And throughout this unfair advantage, the equipment produced by these companies has become pervasive around the world and even reaches U.S. networks. This is not just economic gamesmanship. According to our intelligence agencies, in exchange for this subsidization, Chinese corporations have siphoned data, allowed backdoor access to state agencies, enabled functionality for our network's disruption. And as a result, the technological foundation of our communication networks has been weaponized. Congress and the FCC have recognized the problem of untrustworthy equipment in U.S. networks and are working to ensure its removal and replacement. OpenRAN networks are part of that solution. Almost exactly a year ago today, I published an op-ed advocating for the development and use of software-enabled virtualized 5G infrastructure to replace suspect equipment. Our country has long been a technology leader in software and wireless technology. Growing our capability to make secure infrastructure makes sense from both a security and economic standpoint. And so we need to invest in this technology. And we must do some deep and proactive thinking on the best policies to effectuate our goals of promoting secure telecommunication networks that benefit our shared future and get the best value for the American taxpayer, where we need to rip and replace insecure Chinese equipment. So here's a new idea. I recommend that we explore that each rip and replace carrier rebuilding its network be required to consider solutions offered by an ORAN provider. That would achieve many of our goals, including encouraging global competition with Huawei, capitalizing on U.S. software advantages, accelerating the development of ORAN both as a product and as a business case, and allowing for alternative vendors to enter the market and offer specific network solutions. While no carrier should be forced to adopt it, it would encourage carriers to consider a technology that might otherwise have been overlooked. ORAN holds tremendous promise. Its growth could advance American technological leadership, enhance competition, and reduce our reliance on foreign vendors across the world, all the while bringing down replacement costs. It deserves serious consideration, and I look forward to the conversation that will happen today. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner, for your remarks. Look forward to working with you on this and many other issues, of course, under the FCC's bailiwick. With that, we will kick off the first panel, which is an introduction to open, interoperable, and virtualized networks. And we're starting off with a bang in terms of our panelists. We have Caroline Chan, who's the Vice President and General Manager for the 5G Infrastructure Division Network Platform Group at Intel. We've got Tarek Amin, who's the Chief Technology Officer of Rakuten Mobile. And we have Sachin Katti, who is the who works at VMware and is also the co-chair of the ORAN Alliance Technical Steering Committee. And last but not least, we have Thierry Maupilet, the Executive Vice President, Chief of Strategy and Product Management at Altiostar. Bienvenue, mon ami. But before we get into the panel, though, I have to issue a disclaimer for this and all subsequent panels. The presentations you're about to hear were voluntarily submitted by the presenters and are not contingent on and do not imply any expected benefits to the presenters. By hosting this conference and by providing a forum for these presentations, the FCC does not thereby endorse any device, manufacturer, vendor, or company described in the course of this conference. And with that legal requirement out of the way, I thought we'd just jump right into it with a foundational question, which I will pose first to Caroline. Let's start out by defining the topic of today's event. What is the radio access network? What is an open radio access network? And how does this ORAN or OpenRAN architecture differ from the traditional architecture? Oh, I think you're on mute, sorry.
Sorry about that. I think I was double muted. Thank you, Chairman Pai, and it gave me the opportunity to participate here. So let's start by saying what the traditional network architecture today is. It mostly consists of purpose-built solutions that are based upon 3GPP standards, and it does utilize custom hardware to optimize the network functions. So these RAN solutions today, radio access network, both software and hardware are verified, integrated into an end-to-end system, typically delivered by a single vendor, as you mentioned in your opening remark. So before I go to OpenRAN, let me first touch upon the virtualized RAN solution. About 10 years ago, a group of ecosystem, Intel's part of it, and we started developing RAN functions that run on software, on standard servers, like what you see today in some of the cloud and IT e-commerce. So really take advantage of the technologies like network function virtualization, NFV, or software-defined network, SDN, allowing all the additional flexibilities. So then some groups, such as ORAN Alliance, which Sachin is a co-chair, are started developing interoperability testing specifications with open and interoperable interfaces within and between various subcomponents of the radio access network, and therefore referring to as OpenRAN. So the journey looks like today you have several flavors. You have the traditional network still, you have the virtualized RAN, and going forward, you will have the OpenRAN under the ORAN specifications. Back to you, Chairman Pai.
Well, thank you for setting the stage for this conversation. I'll turn next to Sachin. One of the narratives that we often hear when it comes to 5G hardware is that as there isn't a US-based alternative, and some previous speakers have, of course, made that point as well. Can you discuss how ORAN might diversify the marketplace in that regard, and how it might leverage America's traditional strength in software?
Thank you, Chairman Pai. So I think as Caroline referred, ORAN is pushing the envelope along two dimensions. One is it is virtualizing the radio network, and the other it is opening up by specifying open interfaces. And this, I think, will really open the door for a tremendous amount of hardware innovation to come in, because by definition, when we virtualize, we are now able to run a variety of different hardware underneath and run the radio network as essentially an app, as a software on top of it. And this plays to American strengths on hardware innovation. So look at the amount of hardware innovation that's happening in cloud, in AI. There's a mushrooming of startups that's happening in the Valley now, trying to build hardware that does much better. I think the same amount of innovation will now be able to apply to the network because we can virtualize it. No one has to worry about what the underlying hardware is. The second aspect, because there are open interfaces, it means that I can now mix and match radio hardware from a variety of vendors with software from different vendors. Previously, it was very hard for a new hardware innovation to come into the market because everything was vertically integrated. And to really get your foot in the door meant that you not only had to build the hardware, but you had to build the entire software stack to get in. So the barriers to entry was so high. Now with opening up and disaggregation, you now open the door for innovative hardware to just focus on that, get that right, move the market in that place, and you will be able to get customers because they're adopting open interfaces. So I think the transformation that's happening because of virtualization, because of open interfaces between the radio hardware and the rest of the software, we will actually see an amazing growth of hardware innovation, both on the compute base station hardware as well as on the radio hardware side. That I think is a tremendous opportunity for American industry to take advantage of.
Well, it's certainly an exciting forecast for the future, one that we'd like to secure as well. And I know one of the companies in this space that has been actively doing, not just thinking, has been Rakuten. And we're pleased to have Tarek here as well. Tarek, you've shared with me both when I was in Japan and in my office in DC, your vision of the future. And I know that there was a time when Huawei was set to be the equipment vendor for Rakuten. What changed in that regard, and why did you go in a different direction?
Thank you very much, Chairman Pai, for inviting me to speak in this forum. And firstly, I want to congratulate you on a very well-executed, innovative CBRS auction. We've been watching this from Japan as well. You know, I think to understand the present, it's important to also understand a little bit of the past. You know, I had an opportunity in my life and career to work for very innovative companies that wanted to change the fabric of society by disruption that they could do in connectivity. While I moved to India working for Reliance Jio, I've learned the value of $1, Chairman Pai. I mean, the average revenue per user in India was $1. I learned the importance of disaggregation. I learned the importance of having diversity in supply chain, but also the criticality of having the right component vendors. Then I met the chairman of Rakuten, as we discussed when he came visit us in Japan, and the pillars of Rakuten revolved around three big areas. The first area, I call it courage to explore. Courage to explore, which is an idea. Do we continue to build networks in the same fashion that it got built for decades. And in that context, Huawei was a choice, by the way. Huawei was, I think, almost was ready to be selected as a vendor. Or do we look in a brave world, a world in which cloud becomes part of the essence of how we think about future networks? So that is the first pillar, is the whole idea of courage to explore. To enable this, we realized quickly that the United States contain all the necessary ingredients. You just need the right, for lack of a better word, shift to put these things together. So we invited world-class leading companies. Nokia was one of them, Intel, Qualcomm, Cisco, and we decided that this willing partners could really innovate into the space. We did not want to take the risk, and our chairman and CEO decided that if there is any risk that could be had by selecting Huawei, that's something that we wouldn't want to do. I have, Chairman Pai, one slide, if you don't mind, I want to just share it to everybody. If you don't mind, can you please display that one slide? So when we put the network in play, I mean, I think in the beginning, a lot of people had many doubts about the ability of such an architecture. Can OpenRAN scale? Can it really work? Can it work in dense urban areas? Is this only should be a technology that's secluded only to the periphery of network? And my belief is fundamentally, I had a picture in my office, Chairman Pai, that shows the 2 rockets that SpaceX has landed on a barge. And I said, my goodness, if a human being has managed to put 2 rockets back on a moving ship, we certainly could really do an innovation around cloud technology and innovative. What you see here is a picture. What we committed to MIC, the equivalent of FCC in the US, is a build number that we have doubled. And every single site in Tokyo today is sitting as a cloud native OpenRAN platform. Not only we have realized quickly the benefits and advantages of such an architecture, but we quickly realized that because of its simplicity, our ability to roll services and the agility we could deliver, I think, is unparalleled. So today, we have exceeded north of 6,700 macro base stations. We have committed that by March 2021, we will be at 70% POP coverage. We have launched fully this network April this year, and carrying double the amount of traffic that exists in Japan. But I will tell you what excites me the most is security. This is what I am so thrilled about. The security apparatus of OpenRAN, I call it when you have full visibility, the possibility of what you could do on the network when you have full visibility, transparency, and transparency end to end, not just about software, transparency about where do the components come from, is really an unparalleled opportunity for the industry. And I want to commend you personally for the leadership that yourself, the United States government, are doing around this area. We are absolutely enthusiastic about the future and eager and willing to find a way to collaborate and support and create the linkage needed between Japan and the United States to advance this technology and to show that it is absolutely real. And I invited everybody to come to Tokyo, hopefully when this COVID situation is out of us. I would love now to show you the vision that we talked about being a reality now in Tokyo.
Well, thank you very much, Tariq, both for the hospitality last year, but also for your words just now. And I'll turn to Terry in a second, but I did want to focus on one of the comments that Tariq just made in terms of security. Do any of the rest of you have a thought as to the implications of ORAN for security? Do you agree with him that it is, by being open and transparent, a potentially more secure architecture?
If I may jump in there, I think Chairman Pai. So Tariq said it pretty well. And I think the other comment I'd add is open interfaces means that I can pick the best of breed solutions for each component of the network. And part of that best of breed definition is a secure component. So if you go with a vertically integrated architecture, your security model really is you trust that one vendor and they have to get it right. Here you have the ability to test, you have the ability to inspect, and you have the ability to replace when you find something's not working. And I think by definition, given the innovation that we see in the rest of the world in the cloud, how quickly things can get upgraded, bringing that same cloud flavor to the network, being able to replace and upgrade and in an agile fashion, innovate on the network, I think will ultimately lead to a more secure, more clean network than what we have today.
Terrific. Well, I did want to turn to Terry. So one of the things I noticed from Tarek's slide, from that slide about Tokyo in particular, was the nature of their deployment. And that raises the question, we obviously have incumbent networks that are already built, and we are seeing the emergence of standalone networks being discussed or even deployed. How, in your view, does ORAN play into whether it is a brownfield deployment or a greenfield deployment?
Good morning, Chairman Pai, and good morning, everyone. It's obviously something that we have seen in many other industries where you have innovation. You always have entrepreneurs who want to take advantage of this innovation in order to differentiate. And this has created an opportunity for such entrepreneurs as we have seen and we see in Japan with Mikitani-san, with the help of Tarek, but we see the same innovation being adopted in the US with Dish. And we expect to see the same happening in some other markets, such as Germany in Europe. So there will be a few, but the real opportunity for OpenRAN is, as you mentioned, is about brownfield, meaning operators who have an existing network. And what is very interesting with OpenRAN, because it's built on open interfaces, it is in fact, it's not a technology, it's a 3GPP standard. So you can insert OpenRAN, not just even for 5G, you can already take advantage of OpenRAN in 4G networks. And there are different motivations to do that. And we call it, it's not either greenfield or brownfield. Any operator who has an existing network can do what we call green on brown, meaning that you can insert. And there is obviously a learning curve. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, I don't believe that even building greenfield is an easy task. But for a brownfield, I think there is also a different set of skills. So it's not just about inserting technology. It's about adopting what we have seen in, with the hyperscalers, the people who are familiar with the cloud. So it's all about DevOps, CI/CD, agility. And I think the major driver for brownfield to move forward is really because the 5G requirements are going to require that the network being flexible, being more programmable and intelligent. And this is what it does require, this new architecture. And I think there is also another motivation that we have seen and we hear from major global operators. And I will coin what has been mentioned by one of the major operators. It is a necessity. It is a necessity because you need to have not just a diverse supply chain, you need more choices, but you need a strong supply chain. So we need to change the economics of this industry. As it has been mentioned before, many companies have disappeared. So we have to make sure that as we are really at the beginning of 5G and the next G that will come after, we have a strong ecosystem. And this is where, for a brownfield operator, it's not just to take advantage of a new architecture, which is going to drive a lot of cost saving, CapEx, OpEx, the readiness for 5G or with all the use cases, but also to have access to more choices, a very strong ecosystem. And this is a promise of OpenRAN.
Can I follow up on that key point in terms of green on brown or any type of deployment for some who have already built those networks? What do you see as some of the challenges to the widespread adoption of ORAN? Is it the interoperability with the existing networks? Is it scalability? Is it just simply capital? And this is for you or anybody else who would like to comment on it. And also, as part of that, what do you see as the transition period? Is it a question of years to execute that sort of transition into a more textured network, or is there some other time frame?
So what we have seen, again, which is not really a surprise, like any innovation which has some disruption with it, there's a lot of, at the beginning, it's a lot of denial, and then there's skepticism before you see really acceptance. I think what has been helping the whole industry is the fact that Rakuten has taken such a, making very bold decision to build this network with this new ecosystem, the OpenRAN, is now proven that, as Tarek just mentioned, it does work. It is fantastic technology in a very dense, challenging. Tokyo is a very, very demanding environment. So the level of confidence that we have been able to create now is helping other operators to embark on this journey. So that's, for us, what we see is a major change we have seen in the last 3-4 months, amid the COVID-19 that we are all experiencing. is in fact that many operators now are either not just evaluating but planning to deploy OpenRAN in their network.
Chairman, maybe I could add one more thing.
Sure.
I think if you ask me what is the last 2-3 years learning experience in Rakuten, it's not a green field. It's more like green mines. So we focused a lot on the organizational fabric and the organizational structure. By the way, if you go and converse with the likes of web-scale companies in the US, Amazon, Facebook, Google, you will find the same type of caliber of talent that we focus on building such a platform and such architecture. Maybe this is a challenge. You've asked what are the challenges on scaling this? I would say skill set and organization is a challenge. And the second challenge that I would really see, and this is something I've talked to various different US agencies on, because the question was asked, what is the role of government as well that could play in enabling such disruption? And I look at the US having what a momentous opportunity, really momentous opportunity. The commissioner that spoke a bit earlier mentioned about the US leadership that it used to have during the days of Motorola and Lucent. I would tell you truthfully that the US could seize that opportunity again if it realizes how to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And the good news is you guys have everything you need and the right allies to support this journey. For me, I know what the challenge is to really make this successful. For me, it's about encouraging a good supply chain of components and silicon. And luckily, we have enough good software development companies in the US and in Japan that are able to help us out. So maybe the challenges that I see is slightly simpler. It's about skill set, organization, and the creation of a healthy ecosystem around silicon for the remote radio head and the massive MIMO products that needs to be created. And I think most of the silicon anyway, most of it would come from the US.
Okay.
I just want to add, Chairman Pai.
Yes, please do, Carolyn.
Yeah, green on brown. Just recently, Verizon, the most, the leading, one of the leading operators here in the United States, announced a pilot of a 5G cloud-native end-to-end network built on virtualization, including the RAN piece. You could not get more proven than that. It truly is here in the United States, a green on brown situation. So it can be done. I think that's what everyone is trying to say.
And Caroline, if I could follow up, as I mentioned, interoperability is one of the things that I was curious about, and I know you've done a lot of work in this space too. How important is the standard setting process in establishing or enabling interoperability between and among different suppliers? And what role do organizations such as the ORAN Alliance or the Telecom Infrastructure Project play in that process?
They're foundational. Industry standard bodies and groups are the foundation to drive interoperability between different suppliers. And we've seen that time and time again in 3GPP, but especially with the OpenRAN, both organizations, ORAN Alliance and TIP, our Telecom Infrastructure Project, play a key role. While the ORAN Alliance defined the standard interface between disaggregated RAN components, the TIP, Telecom Infrastructure Project, focusing on prototyping, integration, and testing. In fact, T-Mobile is hosting a TIP 5G NR OpenRAN lab right in your home state, Kansas.
Oh.
So, yeah. So ORAN Alliance and TIP have announced a partnership in February this year to develop interoperable 5G RAN solutions. One of the first output will be the release of OpenRAN 5G NR base station platform requirements document. It provides a blueprint for the suppliers to test against. And it's not just a one macro solution. People can add in a different modules to that as well. It's back to what Thierry talked about. It really truly leverages the fact that the US ecosystem has a proven software innovation. We have been in the cloud technology, server technology for a long time. It really is the standard body plays an important role to put all the Lego pieces together and make sure they're interoperable.
Just to add to that, Chairman Pai, so as chairing the ORAN Alliance right now and involved in the founding of the ORAN Alliance, I think one of the lessons I wanted to highlight, which is very important, is this is, as Caroline said, it's foundational, and it's foundational also because these are new organizations that are giving operators a voice in the standard setting process. So historically, the standard setting process has been dominated by the incumbent vendors, and it really was, what do telco operators want to innovate on? How do they want to disaggregate, build out their new 5G networks? And so both these bodies were about how do we give operators a voice, get them to specify what would their requirements be, how would they like to see the platform change? And I think that's why they are very critical as we go forward.
That's great. And I will note that with all due respect to Silicon Valley, I'm not surprised. Kansas prides itself on being on the leading edge of technological innovation. So thank you,
Sure
Caroline, for pointing that out. Sachin, in one of your earlier comments, you said something that piqued my interest in terms of picking the best in class or best grade components. That raises the question then of integration. And what do you see as some of the challenges and opportunities in terms of integration from an operating perspective for you or anybody on the panel, since all of you, of course, have expertise in this area?
Sure. If I may, I would like to share a slide.
Sure.
Can you see my screen?
I can, yes.
All right. So great question, Chairman Pai. So I think the dilemma is the following, right? You want the benefit of choice without the pain of integration. Because historically you have been able to get one solution and have that deployed everywhere. And I think this is really where actually there's an opportunity for innovation for US companies. If you look at how cloud services are delivered today, there is basically, as a developer, you go and mix and match several different services, and then you can build a brand new service within a matter of days. Why can't that be true for telco? So this is what we are trying to now realize in the US with Dish. And this is going to be a great proof point for an OpenRAN network, an OpenRAN 5G network in the US, which is going to be running at scale. But really this idea that you can build an automated way of continuous integration and continuous deployment. Thierry was talking about CI/CD pipelines, but really leverage the best of cloud tools and have essentially an app store concept. So when you talk about network, its network is a collection of network functions delivered as software. In each one of them, to oversimplify this, is an app. And so really the vision here is that you can build an automated way of doing continuous integration and continuous deployment, and then let cloud technologies manage the deployment of these functions and software across all of the different clouds in the country, and figure out how to stitch them together and deliver a mission critical service like a 5G network. So I think this actually system integration should not be seen off as a challenge, in my opinion. It's actually an opportunity for US innovation, because this is what we've done really well. We mix and match things. This is how we innovate, right? We mix and match a bunch of different things and produce new products. I think this is exactly the approach we need to follow for 5G. And this is what we are doing for Dish. And I think it'll be a fantastic proof point for US innovation.
That's terrific. And Tarek, I don't know if I thought I saw you were looking to jump in as well, or maybe I missed.
Yeah, I just want to add one additional thing, by the way. I think, as engineers, to be very honest with you, it's just kind of fun, by the way. Fun. So, I mean, in the early days, I mean, if there is any definition of what we went through is a really out of this world science project in the beginning. And the idea of take a hardware-based baseband, and all of a sudden you move this thing into a virtual machine, and the magic you discover once you move from proprietary hardware to the VM, Chairman Pai, that's what this industry does not understand about what is the benefit of Open RAN. Luckily, as we understand it because we're living it every day, and I keep saying in every keynote I speak about, we're scratching the surface of what's possible. Because the level of automation that you're going to realize when you discover how you could really manage these VMs, and today it's VMs, tomorrow it will be containers, is just utterly elegant. Elegant when you start to think 4G and 5G networks have the potential to be like managed Wi-Fi service. Then that's what I would consider to be the North Star that all of us should be working towards. We have taken actually an advanced, an entire telecom app store concept, because we think that's what we're heading towards. And, in our approach to Rocket and Communication Platform is all about driving this innovation. But I don't think we could do this alone. We need collaboration. We need industry support. We also have really solicited not only industry support, but we also think private as well as government, could really work on this initiative hand by hand to drive such a industry transformational event. And I always say it's not revolution, it's not evolutionary architecture. It's absolutely revolutionary. Once people to start to understand why the enthusiasm and excitement, I only would tell people, wait till you start operating a true cloud network. You will discover the benefits.
That's terrific. One of the things I find very interesting about this space is that in a way it exemplifies what the late Professor Clayton Christensen called the innovator's dilemma, in particular disruptive innovation, and the ability for new firms, smaller firms, to enter the marketplace and really drive some of the technological change. And so, Terry, I thought I'd turn to you. Altiostar is one of the smaller companies, of course, in the space compared to some of the larger companies that we've all heard of. What do you see ORAN portending for smaller players, and how do open networks enable their participation in this ecosystem in a way that might not have been the case in the traditional network architecture space?
Yes, we really consider that it's absolutely essential that this industry, as I mentioned before, is going to be more diverse and be able to attract other companies to participate. It's all about innovation. And the fact that now we are able to build networks, this next generation of networks on software and leveraging the cloud and other things, is creating a new entry point. We are removing barriers which have been in place of the incumbency coming from the traditional vendors. So having this open supply chain, and it's open because now if you are using open interfaces, you have enough confidence that what you are going to develop as an entrepreneur can be deployed with other network elements, but you can participate. And it's very clear that not one single company can pretend or claim to have the best technology for all elements of the RAN. So it's extremely important that we unleash this innovation. It's, in fact, very good news for this country, because we have a lot of assets, a lot of intellectual property that we can now leverage. And that's very much what should be the new definition of content. It's not just where you manufacture your product, it's where's the intellectual property coming from. So there's a lot of intellectual property which now can be really put in the market. And it is because the network is becoming a platform. And if we want to really realize the promise of 5G, you need to attract a lot of application developers who will be able to write and add their value on this platform. And that's, for me, a very fundamental aspect of OpenRAN, that the network is becoming a platform for the operators themselves, but also for other application developers. It's absolutely essential for the success of not just OpenRAN, but for the industry and to deliver for all the different 5G use cases. And as Tarek said, we're just scratching the surface, but we need to create the foundation. So this is the foundation that we need.
That's great. It sounds almost, to use a rough analogy, to the mobile app economy that developed on the 4G LTE platform. That's once you made that platform available, all kinds of apps sprung from that. And you also talked about the fact that a lot of these intellectual property and other assets are U.S. based, and that leads to a question I was hoping to pose to Caroline, which is, how do you see ORAN or OpenRAN solutions leading to American leadership in 5G and other types of wireless technologies?
So I'll just, we talked about it quite a bit, right? The standard interface defined by OpenRAN really creating opportunities for innovations to come to the market. You alluded to that, like during the 90s in the .com area, when you put up the platform, you drive a lot of software innovation. Now the US ecosystem, as we kind of discussed, we've been investing in this virtualization technology for a long time. We have a thriving e-commerce and cloud and IT business. So in the last 10 years, Intel, for example, has been investing in OpenRAN technology over a decade. So we truly started having a lot of these intellectual properties, like you said, like Thierry mentioned too, the cloud native architecture, the server technology, software innovation. And because 5G really marks the true convergence of communication and compute capabilities, not just bringing benefits to consumers, but also transform many verticals like industrial IoT, healthcare, precision agriculture, retail, and so on. We need software innovation to develop great use cases, and operators need the technology tailored to the requirements of these use cases. In fact, Intel, T-Mobile, NASA, Microsoft, and Dell VMware, we actually part of a 5G open innovation based in Seattle. That's a very good example. When you make that platform open, when you make that platform agile, you are inviting the innovation that comes in. So while OpenRAN is not a panacea for US leadership, I do believe it sets a really good foundation for leadership in 5G and wireless technology. Of course, let's not forget all these great use cases need spectrum. So we need FCC leadership under Chairman Pai.
I mean, to add to that.
Oh, sorry, please do, Sachin. Yes, sorry.
I'm sorry, Chairman Pai. So to add to that, what Caroline said, I think if you look at the last decade, there's been a tremendous amount of innovation in applications that run on top of the network. I think the next decade will be innovation on applications that are programming the network, right? That where the network is actually allowing the application to deliver a differentiated experience, like a self-driving car, like a VR, AR experience delivered over the network. And I think that's really what OpenRAN will enable, because it's enabling programmability in the network with open interfaces. So applications can actually program the network and deliver capabilities that you could not do before. And this actually is critically important for the economic success of 5G, because if 5G is going to be yet another unlimited data plan, I think the operators will struggle to make the economics work of a brand new network upgrade. So how do you build services that even the operators can monetize? It's by giving programmers the ability to program the network and deliver these new innovative services. And that's where I think OpenRAN and open programmability, open interfaces are a critical building block.
I'd be curious then how, in terms of programmability and what that might imply, do you see a role for adjacent technologies, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, and in particular, to play a role in optimizing these networks?
Yeah, just like a self-driving car, how do we build a self-driving network, right? So the vision that with 5G, and you touched on this question on integration earlier, which is disaggregation is going to lead to more complexity because you have a lot more components to tune and program and put together. And we want to tame that complexity by leveraging technologies like artificial intelligence. But AI is not going to be that useful, that applicable if the network is closed, if those interfaces to program it don't exist. So I think the way it's a two-step, right? So which is you open up the network, have the interfaces, have the programmability, and then AI comes in to figure out how to program the network to actually deliver on this open disaggregated vision with all of these new services. So I think AI is kind of a critical building block to tame the complexity of rolling out a new 5G network, and also being able to leverage all of these new capabilities for delivering these new innovative services on top of the network.
Let me add just to that one more comment. I want to give you a practical example of the power of when we talk about open RAN and open interfaces in our network. So we have taken an approach. There's an amazing creative smaller entity, 11 people entity in San Diego that provides what is called in this industry self-organizing network. Now, in any traditional legacy architecture, if you ever asked a big vendor, can I please integrate a small little agent software footprint in the eNode B software, it would be absolutely impossible. So today in our network, through open APIs, we've taken a very powerful AI machine learning algorithm that does, the auto configuration for the network, the zero touch configuration, self-healing, integrated through API, an 11-man company delivered on a spectral efficiency gains that are just unprecedented by just this concept of being open. So we've taken, Alteo Star software, and top of Alteo Star software, through API integration, through the apps that the industry dreams about, is this interoperability of application. I mean, you want to talk about the power that you don't have to create everything by yourself. You just have to provide a platform. And on top of the platform, the innovations will come through many, many startups that exist already in the industry.
It's incredible. Well, I noticed that we have about 5 minutes left, so I want to be respectful of your time and close with the following question. This is a very exciting look at where we are going and where we are in some cases. What do you see as the role of government, the FCC in particular, but not exclusively, in encouraging the growth of the Open RAN environment?
Yes, and if I may start. So obviously we have a responsibility as an industry to educate. And when I say to educate, people don't know what they don't know. And we have discovered, certainly in the last 2 years, that OpenRAN as an emerging option needs to be explained. We need to explain what is all OpenRAN about. And there was a lot of, we are living in the world of fake news. So we understand that a lot of information has been communicated that, was not true. Obviously now having real network deployed is the best way to educate and to say that this is real. But I think what is important here is, especially from a US point of view, in a US perspective, is really we are looking at the government and the policymakers to facilitate the adoption of OpenRAN. And I have heard this many times when we are competing outside of the US, that everyone expects that the US being a showcase. A lot of the technology is coming from the US. Obviously we have a lot of trusted partners participating in the broad ecosystem, which is great. But I think it is a unique opportunity for the US really to take advantage of the innovation. There's tremendous level of innovation, not just from Altiostar, from other companies. In fact, we can mention that VMware or Cisco and others were not able to participate in this part of the network. Now they are. And so this is extremely important that we have the opportunity to show, and Dish is going to deploy. This is great. I think there's a unique opportunity where the FCC is obviously very much driving this transition for the rural carriers. Wouldn't it be great that the real carriers are going to be able to take advantage of this innovation? Wouldn't it be great that maybe with the same dollars that we are going to use for the US taxpayer, we can do more? We can, really reduce the digital divide. So that's the kind of thing that I will believe that the US government and policymakers can help us. And when we compete outside, obviously we need to have a level playing field. When we compete against, untrusted vendors, as a startup, we can only compete on our own merits, that we have better technology. It's competing with innovation. And in fact, we have to compete with innovation. That's the only way you win. But we have to make sure there's a level playing field. And we need the support of governments to do that.
Terrific. Well, Sachin, did you want to close this?
Yeah, no, so just to add to that, I think this may be in terms of what role could government play. I think the government has especially a very important role to play with, to pardon my pun, how do we make green shoots grow in a brownfield environment, right? So essentially, I think the way as new spectrum comes out, and there have been so many spectrum auctions that have been successful recently, and carriers are going to deploy new networks, I think incentivizing them, nudging them to deploy open radio interfaces. Because one of the biggest challenges is if you deploy a proprietary radio now, you're stuck with it for the next decade, because it's really hard to send people out there and replace radios on cell towers. Deploy open radio hardware and then virtualize the software, because then you gain the flexibility of making the right choices in the future, and you're not locked into a particular choice, because hardware is the one that really locks you into a particular choice for the next decade. So the government could play a great role in making sure that both of these, as we transition towards 5G with this new spectrum, that we make sure that we get the deployment architecture right.
That is terrific. Well, I'm afraid we are out of time, but I just want to thank again all of our panelists, Caroline, Tarek, Sachin, and Terry, for lending us your expertise. I've learned quite a bit in the last hour, and I'm sure there's much more under the surface of the water, so to speak, for me to follow up on. Thanks to each of you for taking the time to be with us today, even in a virtual environment. I thought the conversation was quite lively, and hopefully some of the viewers thought so as well. With that, we will begin the second panel after a short break. So stay tuned for the folks who are watching on the live stream. We'll be back in a few minutes. And thanks to you all again. Appreciate it.